This is a brief visual overview of the Martin Wallace game Age of Industry. The game is set during the 19th century Industrial Revolution, where players invest in and develop industries to make the most profit. The game can be played on different maps. The game board features maps of Germany and New England. Japan and Minnesota maps have been released in a recent expansion. A quick introduction to the areas of the board and the components. This is the player turn order track, the money spent area, coal and iron demand display. This is where players build their industries. These are the connections where players build railways, player displays, the player's individual industry counters, the card deck, iron and coal cubes, loans, money and market counters. Setting up the game. Each player chooses a colour and places their industry counters on their player display in the order stated on the display. The counters represent cotton mills, factories, ironworks, coal mines, ports and ships. Each player also has a supply of railways. Randomly decide the turn order. Shuffle the cards and give 6 to each player and make a draw pile of 2 cards next to the deck. Fill the coal and iron demand display with coal and iron cubes. Shuffle the market counters face down and place 1 in each space with a market image. You are now ready to start playing Age of Industry. Age of Industry is played over a number of rounds consisting of 3 phases. When each player has played 2 actions, players determine the order of play for the next round and then pay interest on any loans they took out. The game ends at the end of the round when the deck has run out and 1 or more players have no more cards in their hand. Phase 1. Player Actions. Each player must perform 2 actions. Once he has completed his actions, then play moves on to the next player to perform their 2 actions, and so on. There are 6 actions to choose from, and a player is free to choose the same action twice. After each player has completed both actions, they must place all the money they spent on the player order display. This will determine the player order for the next round. Let's look at the 6 possible actions in turn. Build industry. This action is the most complex, but in explaining it, I will have explained 90% of the mechanics of the whole game. On the board are several spaces to build an industry. The symbol on the space indicates what type of industry can be built there. If there is no symbol in a space, then a player can build any one of their 3 main industries: cotton mills, factories or ironworks. A player must play a card to perform the build industry action, either a location card or an industry card. Both types of card limit which of your industries can be built and where on the board they can be built. For example, a cotton mill card can only build cotton mill industries. Let's look at some of the restrictions when you play an industry card. You can only build an industry on the board if you connect the location with one of your railways. You can also build an industry if you have already built an industry at a location with 4 industry spaces. You can build an industry over one of your previous industries as long as it has a higher technology level. You can build an industry if you do not have any other industry counters on the board. If you play a location card, then you can build in a location of the same colour as the card. You don't have to be connected to be allowed to build there. To build an industry, the player takes the relevant industry counter from his player display, and always the one with the lowest technology level. To build the industry, a player must pay the money shown at the top of the box and also pay coal and iron cubes if they are shown as well. To pay iron or coal, the player takes the coal or iron cube from any coal mine and ironworks that are connected to the space in which he wishes to build. The coal mines or ironworks can belong to any player, but they must come from the source closest to the space where the industry is to be built. If there is no source for coal and iron on the map, then a player is free to take it from the coal and iron demand display. To do this, the space where the industry is to be built must be connected either to a port owned by anyone or a location with a distant port symbol on it. To use the coal and iron from the display, the player must pay the associated cost and must always take the cube from the cheapest row. When a player builds a coal mine or an ironworks, they also place a number of cubes on the counter as stated on the box in their player display. For example, if you build a level 2 ironworks, then you would also place 4 iron cubes on it. A way of making money is by building a coal mine or ironworks when there are empty spaces on the coal and iron demand display. If the location you built in is connected by railway to a port or a distant port, then for each cube you can put on the demand display, you can take the amount of money equal to the value of the row. When the last cube is removed from a player's coal mine or ironworks, then the counter is immediately flipped over and the player that owns it takes the amount of money indicated on the player display. A player can build a railway counter on any link that either connects to one of his industries or to a location that he already links to via another railway counter. The first railway counter built costs $1. Each counter built after the first costs $1 plus 1 iron and 1 coal cube to be moved to either of the 2 locations the railway counter is linking. Sell goods. Cotton mills and factory counters are able to sell goods to connected ports or markets as long as they are unflipped. The industry counter you are selling from and the counter you are selling to must then be flipped. The respective owners of the 2 counters then receive the amount of money as indicated on the player display. A player can complete as many sales as they want during this action. There are a couple of restrictions. The industry you sell from must match the kind of goods the market will accept, and a level 1 port will only accept cotton. Development. This action allows you to remove one industry counter from your player display. To do this action, a player must discard one of the cards from their hand. This is the only way to remove the level 0 factory and ship technologies. Take 2 cards. This action is the only way to replenish the cards in a player's hand. Cards can be taken from the card display or from the top of the deck in any combination. The maximum hand size is 9. Pass. A player can pass by discarding a card from his hand. This doesn't restrict the player from choosing other actions in later rounds. Phase 2. Determine new order of play. When all players have completed their 2 actions, the game proceeds to this phase. The player that has spent the least amount of money becomes the new first player in the next round. The player who spent the second least amount of money occupies the second position, and so on until all players are given a new start position. Phase 3. Pay interest on loans. In Age of Industry, players start the game without any money, and loans are taken out by a player as and when he needs the money to build an industry or pay for resources. Each single loan allows the player to take $10 from the bank, and he can repay it at any time during the round at cost. In this phase, each player with any outstanding loans pays the bank $1 for each $10 loan they have. Once this phase is completed, a new round is begun. Ending the game. The game ends at the end of a complete round when one or more players have no cards in their hand and the deck has been exhausted. Winning the game. Players add up the value of all their industrial investments and profits from their railways. Each railway counter earns the owner $2 plus the number of occupied spaces at the end of each link. Then each player must repay each loan they have if they can. For each $5 a player has, it is converted to 1 victory point. For each industry counter a player has on the board, it scores victory points equal to its technology level. For each $10 loan still outstanding, players must subtract 5 victory points. The player with the most victory points is the winner. And that's my brief guide to how to play Age of Industry. Thanks for watching the video, and I hope you find it useful.